Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 1:32 p.m. on the 14th of April 2025, and at this point in time, looks like we're about to get more rain, which is rather upsetting for me because I was expecting the lawnmower man to come this afternoon and mow, but I've just messaged and said maybe we need to reschedule because the grass is very boggy and slushy and wet out there, and now it's going to rain. It's going to make his job even more difficult. It's annoying because I've been trying to get them here for a week, and so the grass keeps growing, and now we've got this bog situation. But if they would only come and do the job like within a few days of me requesting it, could avoid some of this, but look, it is what it is. I'm sure they're very busy because the weather people, and they probably have lots of other clients with similar problems right now. So it's very, very frustrating. But anyway, yes, I can see the rain already moving in the southeast. So it was a nice enough day this morning. I got to put some washing out, and which reminds me that it'll be all bloody wet now, getting wet in and out with the washing. Drives me nuts. But anyway, I got to do some weeding, and it was quite comical actually because I'm wearing a short skirt and this top, which I didn't realise, but when I bend over it's like, yes, quite a bit of boobage display, and I'm concentrating on pulling out the grass and the weeds out from around where my blackberries and little remnant pomegranate tree is, which died, but well, actually the lawnmower man killed it, but there's another little shoot coming up. Don't know if it will survive. I transplanted it, there weren't many roots, so that little stick will probably die too. But anyway, I was pulling all the long grass and weeds out. It was quite a bit of effort for such a small area, and so I was squatting down in my short denim skirt with legs akimbo and tits hanging out, not realising, because I'm working at babies. I mean, you have to laugh. And this man goes trawling past up the street with a bicycle. He wasn't riding it, he was just pushing it, and he's looking at me like this. And so I look back and like, resting bitch. I don't know what his problem was. And then I looked down, and then I realised you could see my pink bra and mama jobbies all hanging because I'm squatting down at this, and my legs up. And anyway, I don't know what he saw or what he thought he saw, apart from a very voluptuous Earth Mother Goddess weeding her sacred space garden. And all I could think of was, well, fuck you. Anyway, because I could feel that someone was still staring at me, I looked back, and sure enough, he was still pushing the bike up about, 10 metres on. He was still glaring at me. Must be something very erotic about a woman not giving out any fucks, digging her garden up. Bit of a worry that actually. Anyway, it was kind of comical. So once again, I just shot on my fuck off kind of look and kept digging because I had a task at hand and it had to be achieved. There's a lot more weeding I need to do. I need to go up the side garden and weed all up the side there, but now it's raining, so today is not the day for that. I'll save that maybe for tomorrow or some other day where the sun comes out to play for long enough for me to jostle and hustle in my garden like an intrepid gatekeeper of Titania's realm in service to, the king and queen of the Fae. Got to behave myself. Don't want to invoke them too much because you upset the fairy folk. and have a life of hell, and I've already had a life of hell. Quite enough hell, quite frankly. So anyway, but in service to them looking after the land and the garden here, it's I'm keeping it looking as nice as possible. But I am upset that the lawn mowing won't probably happen because it's just a constant battle on this land. It's too much grass. Far, far too much grass. I should get a bobcat and rip the whole lot up and turn it into some kind of meadow with lots of wildflowers and you know what that would mean, don't you, people of Earth? More weeding. It'd get out of control really quickly. Because also I'm not young anymore and it's hard to keep up with the weeding even. I've been lucky, I've sort of fine-tuned it too. There's only a few patches that get out of control now, that little garden. For some reason that little garden where the pomegranate was constantly gets overgrown. The sooner I weed it, it fills up again. It's got this kind of weird, creepy kind of like, it looks like gotu kola but it's not. It's some kind of weird creeping thing like that. That takes over and the grass gets very high. And anyway, it's just obviously it's a very nutrient-rich spot because the weeds grow like wildfire. And, the plants that, up until the lawnmower man mowed down the pomegranate, the plants there were sort of thriving. I noticed someone had whippersnip down my blackberry, which will be the new man that started mowing here. And so I must have a word to him about that. Don't mow that down. But he probably couldn't see it because of all the long grass, which is why I got stuck into it this morning. I thought if I remove the grass then he can see, and I'll have a quiet word to him. Don't mow that down, please. It's meant to be a food source. Don't mow down my food sources. Anyway, I didn't get many blackberries this year. I don't know why. It was disappointing. Probably got a handful of that. But they were delicious, the few I got. Yes, it's raining now. Stuff and nonsense. Stuff and nonsense. Right. On that note, let us begin. Wash my hair this morning, so now it's all buffy. From oily to buffy there's no middle ground. Anyway, I look okay for a 60-year-old lady, and I'm grateful I got to keep my teeth. And I'm feeling a little bit better. Got over the ontological shock of finding out that I've been shoveled out because of, I've got a conspiracy theory about that actually. I really have. There's no accidents in the universe. The confluence of events, apart from the fact that someone's horny and wants to move on, it's his business. We were never lovers, but that'd be savage to me, knowing how much I cared about him. It was awful, beyond awful, beyond awful. Anyway, bing bam boom baby. Maybe I'll find someone one day that's loving and genuine, actually dates me and takes me out, spends quality time with me and enjoys my company as well. Doesn't stand there on the stage humiliating me about my choice of songs, which he knows I've always chosen that song. It's my war cry, it's my song. So that was a little knife twist, wasn't it? Infantile. But anyway, let him have his new life and I'll have my new life. Weeding gardens, turning on men walking past the street. That's sad, isn't it? It's ridiculous. Can't even mind your own business in your own garden. But next time, perhaps I should have put on a longer skirt, or I'll have to buy some gardening pants or harem pants or some shit. But honestly, you don't expect some idiot to be trawling past you just as you're sitting there squatting on the ground, digging digging up weeds. It's amazing how they flush out the minute you like, on full display, babies. I have to laugh. Anyway, let us read. Did British agents execute Hess? When Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer of the Third Reich, parachuted into Scotland seeking peace talks at the height of the London Blitz, both Hitler and Churchill labelled him a madman. But declassified evidence now suggests that the leaders knew about Hess's mission beforehand and regarded it very seriously. Hess's journey was, in fact, a turning point in 20th century history, directly influencing the outcome of the conflict. Convicted as a war criminal, Hess spent the final 42 years of his life in Spandau prison. Some historians believe British authorities so feared the impact of the secrets he might reveal if ever he were released, that they had him strangled in his cell. He should have been like Schultz and Hogan's Heroes and just kept saying, I know nothing. But of course they knew he knew everything, because he was one of the architects of the final solution, that monster. Dear Goddess. Lanarkshire, Scotland, 10th of May, which happens to be my daughter's birthday, although not that year. 10th of May, 1941, 11:05 p.m. London was ablaze. My Mittelbau Dora, surviving de facto stepfather, was responsible for that, under duress by the Nazis, and Werner von Braun, building the V1 and V2 rockets that were used to blitz London with. Evil it was. All of it. War is hell. Genocide is hell. The COVIDian epoch is hell. And no, I will not be silenced. Ever. Ever. Even if you kill me, my screams will reverberate for thousands of years, because I'll fucking come back to haunt you. And I hand the baton on to other freedom fighters like me who watch these videos, who sit back silent and go, Dear Goddess Tanya, you didn't do that again. Be confrontational and overt and open and out. Yes, I did, because I shrink and hide from no man, woman, child, god or goddess or demon. Because we know you're out there, hiding in plain sight. We know who's we, me, myself and I, and my angels. We know exactly what you're capable of. Because I survived people who survived that other genocide that should never have been forgotten, but yet, when this epoch began, conveniently it was, by my own people, by the way. Hyenas. My blood boils when I think about that. But there was nothing I could do to prevent it, since they were all brainwashed or complicit. Right, on that note, let me continue. London was ablaze. David McLean, a Scottish ploughman, sat in his chilly cottage listening to the bombs fall and to the calm voice of a BBC newsreader describing the devastation. It sounded like the worst Luftwaffe attack yet, He wondered how much longer England could hold out. The bulletin was interrupted by a loud noise from outside. It was a plane, very close by. A plane whose engine seemed to be cutting out. And seconds later, the jarring din of a crash. That's what the sound the V1, V2 used to make. It would literally sputter out and then smash. A downed Spitfire? Surely not here in this stark stretch of countryside, so far from the fighting. He went outside taking a pitchfork, just in case. Where does one buy pitchforks these days? The aircraft was clearly visible near the boundary fence, burning. McLean broke into a run. Perhaps there were people still alive, but long before he reached the wreckage, he was confronted by a tall man with hands held high above his head. In heavily accent, so it wasn't a V1, it was an actual downed plane because it was Hess's arrival. Sorry, just moved along to a different reality of those times, but not that reality. Now it's pissing with rain. Welcome, rain. Come along, water the garden, and chuff off somewhere else. I think they're messing with our weather, by the way, at the moment. There's too much of this nonsense going on. It feels like it's harp. Seriously, I know. There goes the Tanya with her conspiracy theories again. But it's been weird weather since the cyclone. Think about it. It's odd. Right, let's carry on. Sometimes it's best to not think about it, otherwise you just can't get through your day. You just have to bury your head in the sand and hold your nose and think of Aussie. Right. In heavily accented English, the stranger introduced himself as Alfred Horn. Just responding to my lawnmower man. Really stresses me out. Got no idea how it stresses me out because the grass just goes like wildfire. It's just really hard to keep it all under control. So where was I? In heavily accented English, the stranger introduced himself as Alfred Horn, Horn. He had run out of fuel and bailed out. "'Tis essential I see the Duke of Hamilton immediately," he said. "I have an important message for him." The ploughman pointed his pitchfork at the purported Mr. Horn's chest. "Come in for a cup of tea," he replied. "Then we'll see what we can do." Oh, how very English is that? Nothing like a good cup of tea between friends and frenemies and enemies at times. But anyway, just before midnight, a Home Guard truck rattled to a halt outside David McLean's cottage. An elderly captain and 2 privates took the parachutist into custody. By this time the man, obviously insane, was claiming he was Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer of the Third Reich. Nobody believed him for a moment, but he was an enemy pilot nonetheless and had to be imprisoned until higher authority could be notified. The Home Guardsmen took the pilot to a local scout hall where they locked him up until the army could take over. At 2 a.m, soldiers arrived to transport him to Marycliff Barracks. Under interrogation, the pilot, a fit-looking man in his late 40s, reiterated his assertion that he was Rudolf Hess. He had flown here with the full knowledge and approval of the Führer to broker peace between Germany and Britain. The real enemy, he said, was the Soviet Union. This was the menace the two nations should be fighting together rather than trying to destroy each other. Ideally, the pilot said, he would welcome an audience with King George VI, but, failing that, it was imperative that he see the Duke of Hamilton at once. Ramblingly, the German explained that he and Hamilton had met at the Berlin Olympics in 1936. They had become very friendly. The Duke would understand how important it was that they speak as soon as possible. To the parade of officers, steadily escalating in rank, who were invited to the interrogation room, the pilot's assertion sounded like madness. The notion of the Deputy Führer bailing out of a Messerschmitt over Scotland was only a degree less likely than Hitler himself dropping by. But the prisoner certainly resembled the Rudolf Hess they had seen in press photographs and cinema newsreels. The commanding officer nervously decided he had better advise someone high up, very high up. He rang the office of the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, and spoke to a senior aide. On balance, the commander said, he tended to believe that this fellow might be telling the truth. Particularly odd, he felt, was the crashed Messerschmitt, which his men had now inspected. It carried no bombs or weapons of any kind, which is a bit odd since it was flying into enemy territory, but on the other hand also smart, because then they saw that he was actually on a peace mission, not coming with any threats or sense of threat, you know. No, I'll stop there while I'm ahead. Tanyela, yet again they underestimated your intelligence, but that's okay. More fool then. Right, where was I? Following this conversation, the commander also alerted the Duke of Hamilton, whose estate was half an hour's drive away. Churchill, on the Sunday morning, was at Ditchley Park in Oxfordshire. Must be somewhere where you played golf or something. He immediately took personal control of the incident, first calling the commander back to hear more about the interrogation, then ringing the Duke of Hamilton with an order to fly down from Scotland immediately, bringing a photograph of the mysterious German. When the Duke arrived, Churchill glanced briefly at the snapshot a corporal had taken and nodded. It certainly looked like Hess. Right age, right eyebrows, right facial bone structure. What manner of trickle folly was this then? Did this idiot genuinely have Hitler's backing? Or, as seemed more probable, had he lost his mind? In a memoir, the Duke recalled that Churchill then sent him away. His house guests, the Prime Minister explained, awaited him in Ditchley's private cinema. Hess, or no Hess, I'm off to see the Marx Brothers, he said, and strode from the room. Churchill's dismissive attitude toward the arrival of Rudolf Hess would persist throughout the war. Despite Britain's desperate plight in 1941, he had no intention of striking any kind of bargain with Hitler's odious regime. Fair play, I probably would have been just as intransigent too. We don't negotiate with fascists. Or, the N-A-Z-I word. We don't negotiate with them, either that. If you do, more fool you. The Führer seemed equally anxious to repudiate Hess. The Nazi propaganda machine reported that Hitler was shocked by his deputy's treachery and could only suspect that he had lost his mind. Should Rudolf Hess ever dare return to the Reich, he would be executed. Well, there you go. So, he was like caught between two paradigms, none of which he was free in. People are there. I wonder what made him, what possessed him to think that he could just do that, just randomly fly into Scotland, drop down and say, I want to negotiate peace. Didn't even bother to run it by Hitler first, who would not have agreed with that either, I don't think. It's all a bit odd, isn't it? What makes people do things? What's behind the scenes of it? Motivations, agendas. Anyway. Far from being granted an audience with the king, Hess was consigned to oblivion. He spent the rest of the war locked up in high security Scottish, Welsh and English prisons, even sojourning briefly in the Tower of London. Britain's wartime newspapers and their readers largely forgot him. In 1946, Hess was tried with other Nazi criminals at Nuremberg, only escaping execution on the grounds of insanity. Sentenced to life imprisonment, he spent the subsequent 4 decades at Spandau. In 1987, aged 93, he allegedly suicided by hanging himself. Well, he had four decades to hang himself, so maybe he did hang himself, because if they wanted him dead, I'm sure they could have achieved it decades earlier, don't you think? But the history of Rudolf Hess was neither as straightforward nor as simple as that. It now seems certain that the leaders on both sides of the war were lying when they said they'd had no prior knowledge of Hess's peace mission. It must be conceded, however, that Churchill had lied with the noblest of intentions, which is the only time you should lie, to protect something or someone else nobly. I hate liars and people who live in darkness and deception. Weak, piss-weak, inept, uncouth, treacherous, ugly people, of which there are many in our current paradigm. What can one do about that? Hold one's line and maintain one's own authority and cleave to one's truth, no matter what, no matter who. Why am I like this? Why am I like this, people of Earth? Because I grew up with those kind of trash. And I always remember the story my mother told me about the communist propaganda disseminator that got put in a concentration camp, that turned up at their apartment building, my grandparents' apartment, one dark night in 1941, all his teeth smashed out by butt rifle, emaciated, weak, ill, and he told my grandparents what was going on in the camps. They got quite a rude awakening that night. They begged him, please, please give up being a communist. Please stop sharing those propaganda pamphlets. They will kill you next time. And he stood there, weak and emaciated, toothless and driven, and said, I can never stop. I must fight them every day in every way on my feet. And he died, perished. They put him back in the camps. In a matter of months, he was dead. But that, even to my very first time my mother told me that story, I was about 10 years old. My very young, impressionable childhood mind, I thought, that was courage and honour and decency, defending your right to your truth and your politics, which communism was enough to get you killed in Nazi Germany. They didn't like communists about as little as they liked Jews. And no human being should be othered or persecuted or vilified for thinking differently or having some other belief system or religion or creed or looks or politics. Much as I abhor the current breed of politicians now that participated in the COVIDian genocide, I still wouldn't go out and kill them. I'd just tell them to get away from my front gate because they're not fit for human society, but I certainly wouldn't kill them. Jesus. Anyway, this is what we're left with now. The fallout that actually began back in that era, 1933 to 1945. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Right, where were we? But the history of Rudolf Hess was neither as straightforward nor as simple as that. It now seems certain that the leaders on both sides of the war were lying when they said they had no... I read that, dear goddess. Yes, he had lied with the noblest of intentions. Let us continue. And now the sun comes out. Fickle finger of fate. A beautiful flock of birds flying over there. They look like pigeons, actually. Entire flock. Interesting. Right. I'm getting hot, people of Earth. Woman who survived 15 near deaths. Second generation survivor of the Holocaust. Gets a little bit hot under the collar when she sees the same playbook being repeated ad nauseum. And no one doing anything, just going along to getting along, just complicit with their silence. It's utterly chilling. In 1941, Britain's wartime Prime Minister was being forced to fight on two fronts. against the Nazis abroad and against a powerful lobby of appeasers and defeatists at home. Yes, it's pretty much the same situation here. Appeasers and defeatists. Weak, inept, cowardly curs. Many members of Britain's ruling class were convinced that a détente with Germany was not only possible, but desirable. Peace with Hitler would safeguard their properties and their profits. It's interesting that that's all they actually cared about, not the horrendous loss of life. Churchill, who distrusted Hitler and abhorred his genocidal policies, would have no truck with the peace movement. While he was leader, Britain would pursue a policy of total war on Nazism. To the peace lobbyists, it was obvious that Churchill would have to be replaced by a more malleable Prime Minister. Augsburg, Germany, 10th of May, 1941, 5:45 p.m. Although few people realised it at the time, the Hess mission and the farce into which it deteriorated would prove pivotal to the survival of democracy. If the Deputy Führer had not made gross navigational errors combined with naive blunders, the outcome of his visit might have been successful enough to change world history. Excuse me. The comedy of errors began when the 47-year-old politician took off from a private runway at the Messerschmitt factory in a twin-engine ME-110 or 110. I don't know how you pronounce that. The plane was unarmed and carrying extra fuel. Although Hess flew through heavily guarded airspace toward enemy territory, no German fighter or anti-aircraft unit tried to stop him. Hess sincerely believed that in flying to Scotland, he was responding to an invitation from the Duke of Hamilton, who he imagined was an activist for peace. However, declassified documents have revealed that he was the victim of a sophisticated trick. Months earlier, Britain's SOE, Special Operations Executive, had begun to intercept secret letters sent to the Duke by Hess's private secretary, spelling out proposals for an armistice. The British agents had replied, forging the Duke's signature and suggesting a confidential meeting at a Scottish estate. The audacious hoax was designed to destabilise Hitler. The Duke's role in it, when he discovered that he had a role, would be to do exactly what the SOE told him. The smuggled letters at the heart of the deception told Hess that the airstrip near the Duke's mansion, Dungerville House, would, in defiance of blackout restrictions, be lit up for him on the night of his arrival. The number 2 man in Nazi Germany would have a dream run into Scotland. As he crossed England's northern coast, Hess must have felt confident that all was going well. 3 Spitfires scrambled to check on him, made no hostile move. And when 2 Czech Hurricane pilots intercepted the lone Messerschmitt 20 minutes later, they too received orders not to fire. Hess undoubtedly felt ever more welcome as he flew on toward the Firth of Clyde, but then everything began to go wrong. In the blackout, where not even the glimmer of a house light was visible, he lost his way. He turned and tried again to find the Duke's brilliantly illuminated airstrip, but the blackness below was Stygian and featureless. Uneasily aware that his fuel was running low, Hess flew on aimlessly, seeking any light anywhere that might guide him to a landing place. But his time ran out. When the fuel gauge needle registered empty, he abandoned the Messerschmitt and parachuted into the darkness below. Analysts still speculate about the major players' reactions at this point. It seems reasonably certain, however, that with his intelligence plot partially unravelled, Churchill knew he had been plunged into a perilous game. The plan had been to control Hess from the moment he landed on Scottish soil. British agents intended to use him to lull Hitler into believing Britain was secretly discussing peace, thus freeing Germany to attack her treaty partner, Russia. Now that Hess had become a wild card in military custody, Churchill realised he would have to get to him first. If the appeasers won the race, they would begin to exert political and public pressure for genuine peace talks with Hess. An Anglo-Nazi friendship, the Prime Minister knew, could only end with the treacherous Hitler invading Britain. Providentially, Churchill was able to neutralise Hess in time. A month later, Adolf Hitler, like Napoleon before him, made the direst mistake of his blood-drenched career by invading the Soviet Union. Hitler held an army of 3 million men against his erstwhile ally, Stalin. That winter, Russian resistance and the bitter weather stopped the Germans outside Moscow, the beginning of the doom of the Third Reich. It also didn't help that that stupid bastard sent them all in summer uniforms in freezing Moscow, Russian wasteland. It's cold in Germany in winter too, but not quite that cold. So, most of them died of cold and hunger, by the way. Outrageous. Not that I'm aligning with the Nazis, don't get me wrong, but maybe it was clearly it was a good thing that failed, but my God, those poor innocent, he was sending children by the age of 14 in the end to the front as well. Outrageous it was. Right, carry on. Until M15's documentation is released in 2017, the full story of the Hess mission will remain unknown, but nobody questions the central fact that embattled Britain's brilliant lies and trickery helped in some degree to persuade Hitler to fight on two fronts. It was the Nazis' disastrous failure in Russia that helped turn the war's tide against Hitler, a result for which, in some degree, he could thank his blundering deputy, Rudolf Hess. In the Hess case, Britain pursued a textbook policy of deception and disinformation. And the trickery seems unlikely to have ended with defeat of the Axis powers. During the 1980s, British spokesmen publicly deplored the Soviet Union's inhumane policy of opposing Hess's release from Spandau. He was an old man, they argued, and could do no further harm. But in truth, freedom for Hess was the last thing Britain wanted. He was privy to secrets which could harm the national interest even 42 years after the war. Better he remain a prisoner or die. In his book, Who Murdered My Father, Rüdiger Hess claims that when Russian attitudes thawed and his parents' release seemed imminent, Britain exercised the death option. 2 SAS soldiers infiltrated Spandau and executed the geriatric prisoner. There is evidence that Rüdiger may be right. An autopsy on Rudolf Hess found marks on his neck suggestive of strangulation rather than suicide. The President's Secret Telegram. President Franklin D. Roosevelt shared Winston Churchill's view that Nazism posed a threat not only to Britain but to the United States, which had not yet joined the war. The President was in regular contact with the British Prime Minister and was particularly interested in what the interrogation of Rudolf Hess might reveal. On 15th of May 1941, 5 days after the Deputy Führer parachuted into Scotland, Roosevelt sent the telegram below. Here's a photograph of the actual telegram, and I'll read to you its text. Secret. Message to former naval person from the President. If Hess is talking or does so in the future, it would be very valuable to public opinion over here if he can be persuaded to tell your people what Hitler has said about the United States, or what Germany's plans really are in relation to the United States and to other parts. Why is that sticky? Got cheesecake on my hand. Sorry. Or to other parts of the Western Hemisphere, including commerce, infiltration, military domination, encirclement of the United States, etc. From this distance, I can assure you that the Hess flight has captured the American imagination, and the story should be kept alive for just as many days or even weeks as possible. If he says anything about the Americans in the course of telling his story, it should be kept separate from other parts and featured by itself. Pardon me. So it's stopped raining and the sun's come out and I'm annoyed, but I still think it's good that I cancelled the mowing because I was walking around in slush and mud before, so it's not safe to work in those conditions. On 7th of December 1941, Japanese bombers attacked Pearl Harbor. America was at war. Who was Hess? Rudolf Hess, central figure in one of World War II's greatest unsolved mysteries, was born to prosperous parents in Alexandria, Egypt, on 26th April 1894. He did not set foot in Germany until he was 14. At the outbreak of World War I, he volunteered for the army, eventually becoming a pilot flying the Kaiser's early warplanes. Hess was deeply affected by Germany's defeat and the humiliating terms imposed upon her by the Treaty of Versailles. What? I didn't know I had an appointment. I haven't made a bloody appointment. deal with that later. When's the 22nd? It's not that far away, is it? Alright, I'll say yes. So I'll just have to flick that text to my other doctor because my urologist requires a new referral. I was going to submit to the Botox, but I don't want to. I'm still up and down about that. My stupid Optus won't send emails from my normal account. That's another battle. I've got to ring them and get them to fix that. I'll just deal with it later. I can't be bothered. It's all too hard. Honestly. It's all too hard, people of Earth. Anyway, where were we? The humiliating terms imposed upon Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. In 1920, he heard Hitler speak at a Munich beer hall and immediately joined the Nazi Party. He was the 16th member. Hess rose swiftly through the party, beginning as Hitler's personal secretary, in which role he helped write Mein Kampf. In April 1933, he became Deputy Führer. In this principally ceremonial role, he showed fanatical devotion to Hitler and was notorious for blindly obeying all his commands. A useful idiot. Hess was not a man who made independent decisions. In other words, he was thick as two short planks. Among Nazis, he was known as something of a lapdog who always sought the Führer's permission first. In other words, lacked confidence and stability in himself and was a yes man. Hitler, say German historians, would undoubtedly have known that his deputy was flying to Scotland to negotiate peace, probably hoping he'd get shot down by, anti-aircraft personnel because he knew he was a useful idiot. Right, I'm assuming that, by the way, useful idiot says as useful idiots does. Right, I'm going to continue on with the next chapter because that was rather short, that one, 53 minutes. The next one's short and the next one's short, so I might do a couple more stories. So the next story is Mystery of the Shadow on Mars. Almost half of the probes fired from Earth to Mars have been lost, but none of these costly failures has baffled space scientists more than the disappearance of the Russian spacecraft Phobos 2. On 27th of March 1989, moments before its communication systems blacked out, Phobos transmitted two mystifying images back to ground control. The first showed what appeared to be a gigantic cylindrical object. The second, a shadow 25 kilometres long, which the intruder was apparently casting on the Martian surface. And that wasn't the end of it. In September, Britain's Channel 4 televised further photographs from the aborted mission, images almost too bizarre to be believed. I've got to get onto this, people. Just give me 5 minutes. Sorry to interrupt, but it's grinding my gears and I have to function in ordinary, normal human reality and potentially have to submit to the Botox, which means I could potentially die. But then I thought I was going to lose 3 teeth and I was wrong about that. So calm my farm, people of Earth. Calm my farm. Right, I need to find out how to get into Gmail. Just bear with me. I struggle with technology now. I was never all that good at it, but now it's this almighty bloody struggle, which means there's some kind of brain deteriorating as well. Why does it do that? You say yes, it was me, and then it jumps to YouTube. It's like, what? Just bloody open. Dear goddess. No, I don't want an app. I had this problem last time, trouble getting in. It's like I have to download it again. For the love of all the gods. Right, we'll start reading all that's faffing about. Phobos 1 and its companion, Phobos 2, were the most sophisticated and expensive space vehicles the Soviet Union had built. The ships were packed with advanced European technology and powered by solar panels. They were principally programmed to analyse the composition of their namesake Martian moon Phobos and to study the surface of Mars itself. Both probes disappeared before they had completed their tasks, which is fascinating. Get all the way to Mars and then just randomly disappear. Phobos 1 launched on 7th of July 1988, fell silent on 2nd of September. An official announcement blamed the failure on a software error which had turned the spacecraft's solar panels away from the sun, thus depleting the batteries. That's the story they tell us anyway, people of Earth. NASA, never a straight answer. Remember who its chief architect was? A genocider in Middle Baldora. Don't forget the facts, people of Earth. Right, where were we? Oh, we're in. Now I have to figure out how to do. Compose. Because I'm in a different, I have to use Gmail and it's a pain in the ass. Right. Refill, required for doctor. That doesn't look right. Cut that. Just 1 minute. Sorry, I know. Multitasking. I could have been a successful woman if I wasn't screwed over by rotten men and parents and trauma and government. Shh. Try to be happy. And strive to be happy, people of Earth. Let's try that again, Sam. Play that. Oh, no, don't. Don't be a schmuck. Lost it. Can you believe I lost it after all that? This is why I go insane, people of Earth. So chasing your tail ad nauseum. Right. And I have to write the bloody thing again because I lost it. Requited I wrote instead of required. One letter out. A requited love is required, people of Earth. Dear Goddess. So many sick puppies, so little time. Anyway, what can I say? It was fun while it lasted. Little fantasies and delusions and trickster spirits and sadistic psychosexual behaviours. Yes, I'm not quite over it. Probably never will be. It's another repeat pattern. Repeat patterns really piss me off, by the way. It means that there's some kind of major healing that still needs to take place and probably might not happen until I eventually die. So I'm annoyed, people of Earth. Very greatly annoyed. Right, now here we go. Regards. Kind regards. Keep it a bit more official. Alright, I think that'll work. Maybe. Now I just need to check that it's sent, because sometimes I think I've sent things and they turn out to not be sent, and then that grinds my gears too. No, it's working. Right, it's worked. All this for Botox treatment I don't want. Round and round I go in a circle going nowhere. Anyway, right. So I had just got to the point reading where the never a straight answer lie that the battery's depleted because the solar panels were facing away from the sun. Russia's hopes now rested on Phobos 2, which had been launched 5 days after its sister probe. During its long voyage to Mars space, the vehicle transmitted large quantities of data about the sun. By late March, it was ready to begin the mission's final phase, releasing 2 landers onto the surface of Martian moon Phobos. One was a mobile hopper, the other a stationary platform. However, before the Russian controllers could command Phobos 2 to perform these tasks, it began to transmit stark pictures. The images bewildered some of the watching scientists and filled others with awe and consternation. The spaceship's camera had photographed a cylindrical object of immense size hovering above Mars. 3 blinks that deserve, don't you think? I think so too. The cylinder was subsequently estimated to be about 2 kilometres wide and 22 kilometres long. Its sides, I always wonder how they can measure things that are out deep in space though. It's like, how accurate would that be? Don't know. Its sizes pictured were perfectly parallel, with rounding at both ends, suggestive, some controllers said, of a cigar. Moreover, the cylinder was casting a shadow on the surface below, a shadow 25 kilometres long. That's a really, really, really big craft. Seconds after this image reached Earth, Phobos 2 ceased transmission. According to the Russians, it was neither seen nor heard from again. NASA's official commentary on the foregoing events mentions neither the cylinder nor its shadow. The release simply reads, "The mission ended when the spacecraft signal failed to be successfully reacquired. The cause of the failure was determined to be a malfunction of the onboard computer." In its 19th of October 1989 issue, the British scientific journal Nature offered more detail. Just before it was lost, the report said the spacecraft was spinning due either to a computer malfunction or to an impact event by an unknown object. Here comes the rain again. Anyway, poor Mama T. Maybe I should have the Botox, because if I die under general anaesthetic, I'm out of here, and it's what my government really wants, isn't it? Get rid of the useless eaters and the ones courageous enough to speak to truth. I know, conspiracy theory, but that's a very convenient way to get rid of one, wouldn't it? Ah, her respiration shut down under anaesthetic. Ah, whoops. That's why I've been trying not to submit to that. But maybe it's time. What have I got to live for anyway? Fucked up world and abandonment and rejection and othering again. Jesus. What is life? What is the value of a life in Brisbane, Australia on the 14th of April 2025 at 2:40 p.m? What does it all mean anyway? But I was determined to make it to 60, and I did. So, well done, Tanya Desiree Aarons. Not sure what I achieved by that, but it's still an achievement, nevertheless. Britain's Channel 4 revealed much more of the story. Following a media conference given by the Russian scientist who had conducted the Phobos 2 mission, the station televised a picture of the cylinder above the Mars moon. The report, also shown in Australia and Canada, went on to show other extraordinary images received by Russian mission control. Dr. John Becklake of the London Science Museum appeared in the newscast to comment on a set of high-resolution infrared photographs taken by the doomed Phobos 2. The shots showed a grid, almost mathematical in its precision, at Hydaspes chaos beneath the surface of Mars. Dr. Becklake said, "This city-like pattern is 60 kilometres wide and could easily be mistaken for an aerial view of Los Angeles. We have some lines on the surface of Mars in the infrared, which means it's heat and it's not visible. As for what it is, I don't know, and the Russians aren't telling us." Here's a photo of the grid pattern beneath the surface of Mars. NASA, without comment, released this infrared image in March 2002 among a large batch of other pictures. The release came 13 years after Russia's doomed Phobos 2 spacecraft transmitted an almost identical grid photograph. Well, to me, it must be some kind of underground city then, that's beneath the surface. But I mean, it's just an assumption. It could be something geological, to that planet. But grids like that usually indicate some kind of design of streets or avenues or thoroughfares of some kind. Anyway, not that don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert, just reading the story like you are, people of Earth. Well, you're listening to me reading the story, but you know what I mean. The genuineness of the Soviet photographs was seemingly validated 13 years later. On 19th of February 2002, America's Mars Odyssey spacecraft, using infrared film, photographed a similar or the identical grid image in the Hydaspes chaos area. NASA released the picture amid a large batch of others on 1st of March 2002. In December 1999, Marina Popovich, who had been one of the Soviet Union's most celebrated test pilots, presented Western journalists with copies of Phobos 2's cylinder photograph. The picture, she said, had been given to her by Alexei Leonov, first man to walk in space, and also a high official in Russia's space program. The Soviet authorities had by this time become secretive about the photograph, excuse me, but she had managed to smuggle her copy out. This picture is only information for thinking, Marina Popovich said. I think she means fuel for thought, but anyway, same deal. Dr. James Harder, Professor Emeritus at Berkeley, agreed. It could be an artifact of Phobos 2's camera, some kind of moonlet, or what it apparently looks like, some kind of UFO, he said. And the mysterious Martian grid? The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's nightly news hour, The National, presented a particularly thoughtful analysis several months after the Phobos 2 event, showing and speaking of a sharply defined rectangular area interconnected with a lacework of perfectly straight canals, much like city blocks. The picture analyst continued. Since no corresponding surface features appeared in visible light, the infrared photo was interpreted as a heat signature of underground caverns and canals. They were unusual in their extreme geometrical regularity, suggesting underground formations of artificial origin. I have actually seen a cigar-shaped UFO when I was a child out across the harbour, in Wellington Harbour. It was a beautiful moonlit night, full moon, and I was actually, as a child, looking out my bedroom window across the sea, fantasising about running away along the shimmering moonlit path that led across the sea straight up to the moon. The sea was so calm that it looked like a silvery path. And then I looked up and saw this enormous, not that enormous as was described here, but very large cigar-shaped craft that even as a child I knew was not an aeroplane, although the direction where I was looking in, it wasn't that far from Wellington Airport actually. So I wonder if they'd actually sighted it too. But anyway, had no landing, no lights, navigation lights or landing lights. It was just sat there, just like it was perfectly ordinary night, just hovering in the air. Anyway. Of the shadow photograph, the analyst said, this depicted in visible light a convex elliptical shadow under Martian landscape. The azimuth overhead solar inclination prevented shadow casting by Martian features, implying a shadow thrown by something overhead in orbit. As no corresponding object was visible in the photo, whatever cast the shadow had to be above the 500 kilometre plus orbit of the Phobos 2. This implies a huge orbital object in order to cast a visible shadow, complete with umbra and penumbra areas. Quite astonishing, isn't it? 15 years after Phobos 2 vanished, NASA's Mars rover was making daily discoveries, even finding evidence that a rock depression had held a salty sea which might once have supported life. The mysteries of Mars are only beginning to unravel. At any time now, the planet may yield up revelations that are not only stranger than we might imagine, but stranger than we can imagine. And this book was obviously, when was this book published? There's been quite a few revelations since then. 2004, so 21 years later, there's been a lot, people of Earth, a lot. Right, I'll read one more story and then I'll quit for the day because I'm getting tired, to be honest. Yes, one more because the next one after that is quite long, so we'll save that for tomorrow. Why is an Audi QFF 66Z stopped out the front of my house, just sitting there at the intersection? It's a bit odd. Probably a real estate agent. Something equally creepy. It's just odd how they're not parked, they're just sitting in the road. Yeah. It's not a crime to sit in the middle of the road. I'm just curious, people there. The Strangler who stole his victims' names. What? Edward Joseph Leonski. The year was 1942, one of the darkest periods in World War II. Large convoys of American troops were landing in Australia to help repel an imminent Japanese invasion. It was pretty bloody scary at the time. I've heard stories about that too. Melbourne was the base for 15,000 US soldiers. Browned out by night, her street lamps switched off and car headlights narrowed to slits. The city was filled with foreboding. How did they narrow car headlights? Je ne sais quoi. And a sudden spate of horrific murders made the atmosphere infinitely worse. On the city's darkened streets, a maniac was sadistically beating, then asphyxiating women he had randomly accosted. The brown-out strangler, as the newspapers called him, proved to be a 24-year-old GI who was quickly caught, tried and hanged. But it was not until decades after his death that two writers discovered a profound mystery surrounding the murders. Inexplicably, the killer's surname was woven deeply into the names of his victims. Now, I did see a photograph about that man here in the photographs. Where was it? Ah, yes, here he is. Hanged he was, which is the only thing to do with a mad dog, as I said yesterday. Put them down like the dogs they are. They're going to be okay. And if they're constantly vicious and dangerous, they're not rehabilitatable. Bing bam boom babies. Right, where was I? Coincidental killer, American GI Edward Leonski. Which happens to be a nice Jewish name actually, but he doesn't actually look like, well, I can't assume he looks Jewish. People always are astonished when I say I'm Jewish and I don't look Jewish. What do Jews look like anyway? They live all over the world in all different countries. It's a very anti-Semitic trope to say, you don't look Jewish. I used to cop it in my own Jewish community though, which was rude, given the fact that we all know there was no particular look. So I've just caught myself out on my own bullshit there, saying that he doesn't look particularly Jewish. He might not have been though. Leonski could be Russian or Ukrainian or some Slavic name. It's the Leon that makes me think he might be Jewish though, the Leon part of his name. Anyway, he grins cheerfully in a Melbourne lockup after his conviction for the strangling murders of 3 Melbourne women in 1942. It's just awful. Leonski's crimes committed on the wartime city's browned out streets were fraught with strange coincidences, starkly linking his surname with those of his randomly chosen victims. Now here's a photo of that other maniac, Rudolf Hess. And yes, I think that's all the photos. There's a couple more. Here's one here of Agatha Christie, but we haven't come up to that story yet, so I'll save that photo for that event. Here's Churchill, Winston Churchill, that was mentioned again in the Rudolf Hess story. And he actually happened to be a little bit psychic or precognitive, warning his staff of needing to evacuate just before a bomb hit the place. Right, let us continue, people of Earth. Albert Park, which I used to go to regularly when I lived in Melbourne as a child. There's a lovely restaurant they used to take me to, my mother and my de facto stepfather, and there's a lovely lake there and lovely playground, and yes, I used to like to go to Albert Park. 3rd of May 1942, 7 a.m. For Harry Gibson, it was the same routine every morning, up at 6 o'clock and at work an hour later, ready to hose down the footpath outside Albert Park's waterfront hotel. Almost always there'd be a mess to flush away, but in the past few months he had been finding a lot more of it than usual. People were drinking too much nowadays. Worry about the war, that'd be the reason. As the high-pressure stream swirled into the gutter, Harry peripherally noticed a movement in the recessed doorway of a nearby dry-cleaning shop. It was a soldier, an American soldier, rising from a stooped position. He'd been there all night, probably sleeping off a binge. The GI brushed himself down and strode briskly away. Harry, his task complete, rewound the hose. Then something, he couldn't explain what, prompted him to stroll the few steps to the dry cleaning shop. What he saw in its entranceway almost gave him a seizure. Sprawled on the concrete was a woman, partly naked. Her eyes were blackened, face caked with blood, clothes torn with what appeared to have been monstrous force. She lay at his feet, unmistakably dead. Harry Gibson ran to the telephone box and rang police headquarters at Russell Street. Homicide detectives and a police surgeon were at the scene within 15 minutes. They established that the woman in her late 30s or early 40s had been savagely beaten by someone of great strength and then strangled to death. Robbery had not been the motive. The victim's purse containing coins to the value of more than £1, $2, lay bloodied beside her. In their subsequent investigation, police found that the woman had lived under a series of aliases. They eventually identified her as Ivy Violet McLeod, an accomplished singer who had often appeared at charity concerts. She had been 40 years old. The killing, clearly the work of a maniac, a sadist, or both, created great public unease. Melbourne was a sleepy city bordering on the provincial. Murders of such ferocity were virtually unknown. 6 days later, the unease turned to terror when a second, violently battered body was found. This time, the discoverer was a night watchman, Henry McGowan, who first came across a woman's handbag abandoned in a lane, and then, at 4 a.m., found the victim on the steps of Morningside House in the city thoroughfare of Spring Street. To police, the killer's signature was almost instantly recognisable. The young woman, brutally beaten, clothes ripped frenziedly away, had been strangled with immense pressure. Marks made by large fingers were visible on her skin. Sorry, I get a little bit triggered because been there, done that, got the t-shirt, bing, bam, boom, babies. And my government allowed all the perpetrators to get away with it, by the way, when I became an anti-government activist. Well, not immediately at that time, but over time, when I realised as a woman, as a mother of very young little girls, we were left to struggle alone without protection. It's just some guy with a trailer. For a moment I thought the lawnmower man had come anyway and cancelled him because it's raining. But no, it's not. Right, where was I? A strange coincidence now confronted the homicide investigators. As in the case of Ivy McLeod, the victim's real name proved difficult to establish. Like her predecessor in death, she had used a series of aliases. Only with the help of press publicity were detectives able to confirm that she was 31-year-old Pauline Thompson, a mother of 2, and the wife of a policeman in the country city of Bendigo. Pauline, pretty and good-natured, had been working as a typist by day and as a radio station's receptionist by night. In this wartime era of manpower shortages, it was not unusual for a woman to hold 2 jobs, and she almost had a third because she worked professionally as a singer as well. On the day she died, Pauline told her husband she had an evening off and would attend a fundraising event at the Music Lovers Club. She left the event early. The last recorded sighting of her was just before midnight when she left a city hotel where she had been drinking with an American soldier. Witnesses saw her hurrying off into teeming rain. After Pauline Thompson's death, several women approached police to say that a muscular GI had ferociously attacked and tried to kill them. Could it possibly be, they asked, that this man was the brown-out strangler? In one incident, the man had become violent in a woman's flat, but fled when her screams brought neighbours running. He left behind a regulation issue army singlet. Autumn in Melbourne was cold and rain-swept. Darkness was falling before 6 o'clock. With the air raid regulations forbidding lights in the streets, women became frightened of walking from the office to the railway station or tram stop. Some began moving in convoys. Others quit their jobs and fled to relatives in the countryside. The exodus quickened after 18th of May 1942. At 7 a.m. on that day, an Australian soldier, Private Donald Wallace, found an umbrella and hat on the perimeter of the US Army barracks at Camp Pell. Shortly afterward, in a slit trench, he discovered a woman's throttled and battered corpse. The brownout strangler's third victim was identified as Gladys Hosking, a 40-year-old librarian at Melbourne University. A popular and accomplished singer, she had performed in university operas and was also prominent in a YWCA choir. In her life's last hours, she left work with a friend, Dorothy Pettigrew. Both lived close to the university. Again, police appealed in the press for witnesses. The result was helpful. Several people said they had seen Gladys Hosking sharing her umbrella with an American soldier. He did not seem threatening, and she was happy and talkative. But the most promising testimony came from Private Noel Seymour, a young Australian soldier. He said he had been standing guard over trucks on the perimeter of Camp Pell when he heard a noise and switched on his torch to check. The beam illumined a US soldier slipping under a railing. The GI, plastered with yellow mud, explained that he had spent a day's leave with his girlfriend and had slipped and fallen while returning to camp. Suspecting nothing, the Australian guard grinned and waved his fellow soldier on. It was not until the next day that he learned about the body in the trench. This was enough for Melbourne's homicide investigators. Convinced the killer must be one of the 15,000 American soldiers based at Camp Pell, they asked US authorities for all the help they could give in tracking him down. Commander-in-Chief General Douglas MacArthur immediately ordered that all soldiers at the camp be confined to base. This enabled the Australian police to walk witnesses through the camp in the hope that they might identify the GI who attacked them. For a time it seemed that the detectives' theory about the culprit's identity might be wrong, but the breakthrough came when the uncle of a woman who had narrowly escaped death identified the soldier responsible. The pleasantly fresh-faced Edward Joseph Leonski 24 of the 52nd Signal Battalion. In a subsequent lineup, the man's niece also identified Leonski. Further confirmation came from Private Seymour, who said Leonski was the mud-covered soldier he had encountered on the night of the third killing. Confronted by the damning evidence against him, the young GI confessed. He was charged with the murders, handcuffed to a bed rail, and placed under armed guard in the military camp's stockade. Edward Leonski should have been tried under the laws of the state of Victoria, of which Melbourne is the capital. But the US military was so appalled that one of its members had committed such vicious crimes against an ally's citizens that it sought the Australians' permission to hold a court-martial. The military tribunal was conducted in Melbourne's criminal court. Leonski pleaded insanity. A defence witness testified that before joining the army, the accused man had been arrested, but not charged, with trying to strangle a young woman in Texas. Psychiatrists called by the prosecution insisted that Leonski, although dangerous, was sane. The tribunal found him guilty of the 3 murders and sentenced him to death. General Douglas MacArthur personally confirmed the sentence on 4th of November 1942. On 9th of November, Edward Joseph Leonski was marched to the gallows in Melbourne's Pentridge prison. Guards reported that he was cheerful, calm, and singing to himself just before he died. "It's a lovely day tomorrow. Tomorrow is a lovely day," which I think is a line from Little Orphan Annie, or words to that effect anyway. In the early 1980s, 4 decades after Edward Leonski's execution, 2 Melbourne screenwriters began separately to research his story. Each of these men discovered eerie coincidences surrounding the case, mysterious flukes of chance which had gone unnoticed by the newspapers of the time and by the authors of books about the nightmare killings. The first writer to start work on the Brownout Strangler case was Cliff Green, who created the acclaimed screenplay for Peter Weir's Picnic at Hanging Rock, the magic-steeped story of a group of schoolgirls who vanish from a school camp. Absolutely fabulous movie if you ever get the opportunity to watch it. One of my favourite horror movies of all time, actually. It's actually based on a little bit on true events. For financial reasons, Baby-Faced Killer, the film Green was commissioned to write, failed to eventuate, but not before he had unearthed 2 fascinating facts I have presented without comment in the foregoing text. Cliff Green told me, "The record shows that Leonski accosted his 3 victims at random. It's pretty amazing, therefore, that every one of them happened to be a singer." Pauline Thompson had worked professionally as a vocalist in Bendigo. Gladys Hosking sang in amateur opera productions and was a member of the YWCA choir. And Ivy McLeod also sang at concerts. Even odder, said Green, was the coincidence of the aliases. Ivy McLeod and Pauline Thompson had used such a variety of false names that when their bodies were found, police had difficulty identifying them, which is also odd. Find people that use false names always to be shady characters, at least. Just saying. Always have something to hide or something dishonest about them. Unless you're in, some kind of witness protection program, so you had to change your name. But I'm talking about, ordinary Joe Schmo and, just randomly, continuously change their names. It's just sus as fuck, people of Earth. But you know my opinion about that anyway, because I outlined it in another video about family friends I had that were sus as fuck and continuously changed their name. Anyway, let us continue. Fellow writer William Nagel's screenplay, Death of a Soldier, was made into a film in 1986. Two elements of the Leonski tragedy fascinated him: the role of Detective Bluey Adams and the uncanny coincidence linking the killer to his victims. Adams's hunches were legendary throughout the Victorian police force, Bill Nagel told me, and in the Leonski case he excelled himself. Adams hadn't been assigned to the murder investigation, but one night he just happened to be sitting in a hotel where Leonski was showing off to friends. The young soldier downed a concoction of beer, whiskey and sauce. Yuck. Then walked on his hands along the bar. Bluey Adams turned to a colleague and said, "That bloke's as mad as a hatter, and look at the strength in those hands. They're Strangler's hands. That's the brown-out murderer." Adams begged the homicide men to look at Leonski. Several days later, his advice, based simply on a hunch, was proved correct. But to Nagel, the most chilling and incredible aspect of the affair concerns the names of the killer and the women he strangled. When the victims' names were arranged in the order of their deaths, they include letters which, when combined, sequentially spell the name Leonski. With a pencil stub and pad, Bill Nagel demonstrated the point. The victims, McLeod, Thompson and Hosking, and the brown-out strangler, Leonski. It's kind of interesting, although I find that a little bit of a stretch, quite frankly, but yes, it's there. Leo and Ski. Odd, isn't it? Like they were destined to be his brides in death. Horrendous. Right, how long does this one go for, people of Earth? Oh, that's right, that's the longest one. Right, we'll finish here and I'll come back tomorrow, no doubt, to read the next story. And enjoy, if you're in Brisbane today, the miserable bloody weather we're having yet again. It started off so lovely, now it's blah, and I'm annoyed about the blah, but this too shall pass. So wherever you are on planet Earth, hold your line, never let the bastards grind you down, and stay safe out there. It's a weird, weird world, getting even weirder by the minute. So, love to you all from Titania's realm at sacred space.